My lords, today we are going to discuss the 5 rarest and most elusive Paragon leaders that we know to occupy our galaxy. These leaders are some of the finest minds in the matters of military theory, scientific advancement, and empire administration. They can and have single-handedly turned the tide of wars themselves. However, these 5 are not necessarily the strongest, they are simply the rarest. Only the most deserving empires will be able to recruit these leaders. I shall detail, in ascending order, with the rarest being the last on the list, the Paragon, how you acquire them, their traits and abilities, and finally detail the report on how we recruited them. I shall begin with Caretaker Ax7B, a machine specialized in caring for others but with the failures of the past embedded in its memory banks. The Caretaker is recruited from the anomaly designated Unidentified Drop Pods. It is an official, an industrialist to be precise, and it is rather good, as its name suggests, at looking after one's population. It reduces the amenities and consumer goods requirements for your population. Dr. Archer reports on how we found the Caretaker. What we first thought to be asteroid debris orbiting Antec 6 has, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a halo of motionless drop pods. It appears that the drop pods surrounding the planet have been drifting powerless for quite some time. Our science teams report that whatever aliens the pods were transporting are now but withered husks on board, having evidently perished hundreds of thousands of years ago. One such pod, however, has shown signs of onboard activity. While its engines are disabled, scans suggest its communications array is undamaged. As such, we hailed them. On the screen appeared some sort of machine, and it began to speak to us. Initiating communications protocol. Hello, unidentified visitor. I am Caretaker Ax7B of the Zolixin Drop Pod 175. I have been programmed to assist citizens during the resettlement procedure. Unfortunately, a hyperdrive malfunction led drop pods 114 through 175 to exit hyperspace 18 parsecs from our intended destination. I have attended our population as best I could. I managed to prevent cannibalism for 1840 days. Unfortunately, the air supply eventually ran out. I tried to call for help via our emergency beacons, but 312 years after our travel, I had to turn it off. I did receive a message from Zolin Prime, our homeworld, and it appears that our target planet was inhospitable. The other Caretaker robots were stuck in a similar situation to me. None of our charges have survived. But perhaps you have citizens in need of tending. If so, I would be happy to care for them. We of course accepted, and now the Caretaker presides over one of our most efficient resource-producing worlds. It is an incredibly effective governor. Number 4. Oakenstalk. Oakenstalk is a commander that we met during routine exploration of an astral rift. As it would happen, we found ourselves approximately 7 million years in the past, but we did not know it immediately at least. Oakenstalk is another example of an extremely elusive paragon, only accessible via an astral rift and requiring a specific path of diplomacy to acquire. But despite his elusiveness, he is rather wonderful. He drastically increases food and farmer output with his plant-based expertise, and will add to the quality of the ground forces that we produce. Dr. Watney reports on our meeting with the Bawul precursors and the eventual recruitment of Oakenstalk. We arrived on a thriving planet. From its dense forests to the verdant plains, this landscape was once diverse and excellently maintained. A vibrant planet-wide garden. We identified a plantoid species that had erected extensive fortifications around semi-organic cities. Scans of the local star systems revealed a blockade of heavily equipped warships. There was no immediate active conflict, but it was quite clear to us that one was brewing. We had the options of attempting to contact the planet's inhabitants, or the fleet in orbit. And we chose to contact the plantoids, in the hope that they were who we thought they were. On the planet's surface, we encountered massive creatures whose bodies were formed by an intricate network of roots. One in particular spoke to us. It spoke with a deep, earthly resonance in a language that we could not understand. The creature bade I held out my hand, and it offered me a seedling, which gently anchored itself into the skin on my hand. Its grasping roots were formed of a strange material that I believe extended to touch my nervous system. There was a moment of instantaneous recognition, thought and root aligned, and direct communication was established between me and the seedling. And it spoke to me. "Halt, unidentified sapient. Please explain how you bypassed the blockade. Are you here to parley? We make preparations for a coming battle. Regrettably, your expedition may be in much more danger than you previously assessed," the seedling continued. "We are the Baul, and you have landed on one of our outer colonies. We are under siege, and our resources diminish. To attempt diplomacy is useless. The aggressors mock us openly. They laugh at our attempts to communicate with them. They identify themselves as the Graner. We believe that their aim is not to conquer our worlds, but to destroy them. It seems that they know no mercy, and we would graciously accept any assistance that you can provide us." Dr. Watney, a proud botanist, an expert on the precursor race the Baul, instantly offered to help. The doctor immediately engaged in discussions with the Baul to determine a practical way that we could lend aid. It appeared that the Baul had attempted to defend themselves, but their military capabilities were quite limited. They could benefit from mechanical or genetic enhancement to improve their army's speed, strength, and resistance to incendiary weapons. But we also suggested the option to help them evade the Graner by obscuring their homeworld with a cloaking device. They may lose this colony, but at least the seat of their civilization may survive. The final option that we could offer was to preserve their seedlings. Although their civilization may be destroyed, we could reseed them in our own timeline. It was quickly decided that we should help the Baul species in any way we could, and as such we used our knowledge of gene tailoring technology to fortify the Baul species for their upcoming defensive war. With few options left to them, they reluctantly accepted the changes to their biology. The pacifistic Baul Empire, built on agriculture and ecosystem management, is now populated by a standing militia with tremendous physical strength. They are now more than prepared for land warfare. Shortly after we had completed the genetic transfer, the Graner decided that they had rattled the saber enough. They landed ground troops and attempted to assault the Baul position. Dr. Watney witnessed these events and describes them as follows. "In the fading twilight of the alien world, the air was thick with an eerie tension. Baul and I stood side by side, watching the descent of the Graner landing craft. There was no time for us to evacuate post-genetic transfer. Whether the Graner had identified our presence, we do not know, but whatever the reason, they had decided to attack in significant force. They had forgone their normal doctrine of firebombing and chosen to land ground assault forces. Perhaps they wanted slaves. Perhaps they wanted us. We would soon find out. We had endowed much strength onto the Baul defenders. Marvelous creatures, it must be said. They had various defensive forms already, but the protectors would be key. They stood almost 4 times my height, pushing upwards almost 10 meters. Their bioluminescent tendrils casting an otherworldly glow across the landscape. The Graner descended onto the planet's surface, their landing craft creating violent shockwaves causing the native flora to recoil in response, and the advance of their troops began. They were clad in some form of battle armor and wielding incendiary weapons, capable of sending semi-liquid material many tens of meters into the air. The Graner began burning the flora around them, purely out of spite it would seem, and advanced towards our position. Little did they know the force that was about to come their way. The several thousand Graner ground forces had advanced well beyond the safety of their ships by this point. They were only a few hundred meters from the wall. With no verbal command given, nothing that I heard at least, great vines and roots began sprouting from the ground, binding onto the feet, ankles and legs of the assaulting Graner forces. With the precision and grace that only a hive mind can achieve, Baul artillery units opened fire. Beautiful flowers that had sprouted mere days before, then in one moment glowed with a beautiful bioluminescence, quickly became fire and rage as they spat some sort of energy or plasma towards the assaulting troopers. The energy quite literally dissolved the Graner. This artillery barrage was quickly followed up by waves of protectors sallying forth over the wall and charging the Graner directly, who at this point were beginning to panic. It would seem our genetic modification had certainly tweaked the Baul pacifistic nature. The assault was savage, brutal and swift. Words do not do it justice. It was over in mere moments. Imagine being rooted in place, your friends around you dying to plasma burns, when a 10-meter tall tree slams down upon you, pulverizing you into nothing more than a bloody mess. The Grunner attempted to burn through the protectors, but the genetic upgrades had made them all but invulnerable to fire and flame. I wonder, have we done the right thing, or have we unleashed a new menace upon the galaxy? After the battle, we made to leave and return home, back to our dimension. The Baul, however, offered us a defensive node out of gratitude, a leader among their protector class. It is essentially a specialized semi-autonomous creature, and according to the creature, it is called Oakenstalk. We of course questioned this Oakenstalk, but how can a hive mind produce an individual unit? It is most intriguing. The creature spoke with a slow deliberation. It would be a mistake to take it slumbering for a lack of intelligence. Specialized to defend the collective, the organism represents the pinnacle of generations of careful adaptation, with our genetic manipulation on top. Oakenstalk greets us grimly, but politely, intent on repaying the favor that we bestowed upon its hive. We asked it several questions, starting with its purpose. Oakenstalk replied by saying that this one was tasked with preparing the colony for defensive war. This involved managing limited resources while under siege, as well as the design and upkeep of the military fortifications. This one maintained steady population levels, despite the blockade. This one's work was deemed useful. We asked the creature how it felt about joining us. It responded by saying that this one did all it could for the Baul. In that role, there was no further room for growth, and when a living system fails to grow, it begins to die. In our dimension, perhaps there was opportunity for service, and thus hope for renewal. We asked the creature how it felt to be separated from its collective, and it responded by saying, limited, frustrating, exhilarating. The sensation was unlike anything that this one had ever experienced. However, the sooner that it was integrated into the workings of our empire, the better. It is much more agreeable to work in the service of a greater entity after all. And the final question we asked was, how did you choose your name? Creature responded once more. One of your researchers that came through the astral rift provided this one with an artificially intelligent X-generation program, a query that was made based upon this one's qualities, and it returned, Oakenstalk. It feels suitable. However, I am noticing that other humans are starting to call me Thorin. In at number 3 is Mercedes Romero. For some, Mercedes Romero will require no introduction. For others, you may have no idea who this rather famous Blorg is. I won't go into her backstory in any detail here, just know that we thought her lost, and as it would happen, she has been found once again. You can find Miss Romero at the ripe old age of 206, exactly the same age she was when she allegedly died. She has an approximately 2% chance of appearing upon completion of an astral rift, and appears to have a special love and unique interaction for humanity. She is an exceptional diplomat, able to gather information about other species and empires remarkably quickly. She is, however, rather annoying to be around. Dr. Harper shall detail first contact with Miss Romero. As we emerged from the astral rift, alongside us we saw an unexpected sight. A dormant escape pod was trailing in our sphere's wake. Soon we received a simple distress signal, accompanied by a live video feed that we put on screen. A repugnant alien stood before us in a daze. It was silent at first, its only motion a slight rocking in a wave-like rhythm. Eventually it seemed to recognize us and made a lunge towards the video screen before restraining itself, and then began to speak. You are human." The alien appeared incredibly excited, barely managing to stay coherent. "I am sorry, I've been fascinated with your culture ever since I was a little spawling." The alien extended a tentacle in an awkward attempt to mimic a handshake. "My name is Mercedes Romero, and it is my pleasure to meet you." We asked Mercedes what she remembered, to which she stated that her last memory is of the Anteri system. She was engaged in a fleet action with a group of friends and then saw a bright light. After that, there was nothing, and she arrived in her escape pod alone and friendless. She spoke again. But you are human. Humans are the most wondrous of creatures. We Blorg have been observing humans for centuries. In fact, much of our culture is based on what we have observed of human life. The colour, the drama, the friendship. They have taught us that life is about more than simple survival. You can also make friends. What a wonderful concept. What a marvel. Finally, and slightly amused, we asked her what she could do for us, to which she responded again. Not a very friendly question, but if service is required, then I stand ready. Of course, I have centuries of experience captaining research vessels, but my true passion is intergalactic relations. By being your friend, I can help you make other friends in the process. Please, if you will have me, let me represent your diplomatic interests. We accepted Miss Romero into the Empire, and we will put her to work in our diplomatic corps. I'm sure she will be a wonderful addition to the Empire. In second place, we have Keides, the Scion of Vargos, and the Lost Child. To find Keides, one must first find the unique Dugas system. Dr. Vasquez investigates. We have picked up an unusual distress signal during routine surveillance of uncharted systems. It appears to be coming from an ocean world designated Duga 4. Very deep within the planet's crust was an ancient escape pod. Its cryostasis capsule contained what appeared to be an alien child. Despite the pod's extreme age, the cryopreservation equipment was still functioning, and the child's life signs are stable. On the planet's exterior, a series of symbols were roughly carved. We translated the symbols: our hope, our future, our scion. The child discovered on Duga 4 has been successfully resuscitated. All vital signs are within a reasonable range for a life form of its type. Still unconscious, it may be some time before the child awakes. A number of items were also discovered inside the pod. The first was a degraded data crystal, which revealed the child's gender, name, and species. He is called Keides and referred to throughout the log as the Scion of Vargos. The second was a strange relic composed of an unknown heavy material. Given its design, it is likely that this relic formed a part of a larger device. Further study is advised. Of a more pressing concern is what to do with the child. Whoever this being was, for the time being, he will still require care. We of course attempted to care for the child as best we could, but in the meantime we intended to investigate these relic fragments. Unfortunately, within only a number of weeks, our ongoing research into the broken relic discovered with the child has hit a roadblock. Given how many pieces are missing, we can only speculate on its true purpose. However, based on the anomalous readings we've recorded while in close proximity, there is reason to conclude the object has an impact on space and time. Our research continues. 10 years have now since passed since we found Keides. Always a remarkably precocious child, his 10th year marks the beginning of more advanced studies. Until now, our focus has been encouraging his boundless curiosity and providing him with all the tools necessary to pursue his interests. In the coming years, he will be tutored by the best minds we have to offer. His potential to become a leader in the sciences more than justifies the investment. The question is, upon what foundation should his education proceed? Authoritarianism or spiritualism? Given the events regarding his founding, we suggested a spiritualistic path may suit him best. Another 10 years have passed. Upon turning 20, Keides is now ready to assume responsibilities of adulthood. In the time since his resuscitation, he has absorbed our teachings with great determination. Despite his obvious skill and boundless intellect, he remains humble. Science has long been his passion, fueling his drive to uncover the truth of his past, as well as the purpose of the broken record he was found with. To his peers, he is now known simply as Keides. Standing tall, Keides observed the situation and his own response to it. His gaze falls to his hands. They were remarkably steady. He was prepared for this day. We asked him what he seeks. What does he wish his path in life to be? He responded, "What does anyone seek to know themselves, to understand their place in the universe? I believe the key lies with this relic. With your aid, I'll commit myself to recovering the final pieces. But do not mistake me. This is no vain quest for selfhood. I am convinced that the power of this subject will prove a great boon to our people. I am indebted to you for saving my life, but I must find answers, and I need your help." Several weeks have gone by since Keides took up his post as a fully fledged researcher. During investigation of the relic, he reported an unusual experience. After physical contact with the relic, visions appeared in his mind. Images of people and places, memories of a long-forgotten past. Although he is yet to ascertain their full meaning, some of these visions depict real locations. He is calling for a special project to explore them. The first planet in Keides' visions has been surveyed. The planet's broken surface is littered with battered and broken spacecraft. At the center of the largest debris field, we discovered the framework of a colossal starbase. With an irresistible power, the pull of whatever led us here drew Keides into a single room inside the base. Among the dust-covered cargo, another piece of the relic was waiting. Upon touching the new fragment, Keides was plunged into another vision. A vast starbase orbited the planet. From its docks flowed an unending procession of battleships. On the deck of the flagship, a young admiral stood, grasping in one hand an object resembling the relic. With a flick of his wrist, the space outside his ship blurred, darkened, and then folded into itself as a black hole appeared. As the admiral ordered his fleet into the darkness, the vision abruptly ended. Returning aboard with the new fragment, Keides placed it next to the existing piece. Both began to vibrate with a piercing hum. Then by some unknown force, the two pieces fused into one. After the fact, the relic appears strengthened. The second planet in Keides' visions was molten and volcanic. Between the bays and swells of the planet's molten oceans, we discovered the remains of a mineral processing facility. Keides reported new visions of a dark corridor that led into a sealed room. Following these images led him to an ancient and smouldering box. Within the box he found another fragment of the relic, untouched by the ravages of time. When he reached out to grasp it, he was struck by a new and troubling vision. The milling activity of a great furnace rose around Keides. Mines, factories and vehicles blanketed the ground. Huge carrier vessels dotted the skies. Beyond the noise, there was a staggering number of portals blinking in and out of existence, folding in on themselves. Suddenly, there was a great rumbling, and the ground began to shake. A strangled scream came from the distance. After recovering from his vision, Keides once again set the new fragment alongside the existing piece. A sharp whine filled the air almost instantly, and the two parts fused together of their own accord. Again, the relic appeared to be growing in strength. The third and final planet was tropical, covered in a ferocious jungle. The perils of the wild jungle proved difficult to safely navigate. More than once, Keides and his team narrowly escaped the jaws of death. Despite this, and as if drawn by a mysterious force, he pressed on, only to discover the overgrown remains of a massive structure. A crumbling stairwell led to a pedestal far above the canopy. There, resting on a plinth of black metal, was another fragment of the relic. Almost instantly, Keides was plunged into another vision. The vegetation peeled back, giving way to a green vista. A beautiful, tame world with animal enclosures the size of large forests, containing species from all over the galaxy. Suddenly the vision jolted, and Keides found himself inside a larger building. One wall depicted a map of several star systems. One system in particular was clearly unconnected from the rest. It had no hyperlane access. Back aboard the ship, Keides set the newest piece of the relic alongside the existing one. Humming and again visibly drawn to one another, they fused. The relic yet again appeared to be growing in power. Keides now believed it was fully formed. After the retrieval of the final fragment, the relic now appears as if it was never broken. Upon its restoration, research on its purpose is promising and ready to continue. A special project led by Keides himself has been prepared. This project has led to some intriguing discoveries. Its connection to Keides have been affirmed. When in contact with his Vargarosian DNA, the relic's particles begin to resonate in high frequencies. Although the mechanics behind this remain unknown, the effects are symptomatic of space-time manipulation. After several attempts to measure and control this process, Keides experienced another vision. Keides described seeing the relic as if from within. Particles the size of suns swirled around him. In the void between, he experienced a surge of power. With his hands alone, he commanded the movement of the spheres. Returning from this vision, Keides placed his hands upon the relic. Now he understood its use and the astonishing scope of its power. When properly controlled, it has the ability to collapse 2 points in space, effectively creating a stable wormhole. The Vargosians called this device a key. Spurred on by this discovery, Keides acted on his own initiative to open a wormhole in our home system. Not even he knows where it leads, but his will remains resolute, believing it is likely his people's home. With great haste, Keides took his vessel into the newly formed wormhole. At the other end of the relic-spawned wormhole lay the Sussex system. Shortly after our exit from the wormhole, sensors picked up a fleet of hostile drones. They appeared to be keeping vigil over the system's single planet. Initial scans suggest there are no life forms present among them, nor on the planet itself. Keides stated with a certainty that the planet is indeed the origin of his people. He believes it is sure to hold answers. A demand from the drones to open comm channels came through. As the channel opened, screeching static blends with a wash of robotic vocalization. In cycles, each voice overlaps the next, the message volume oscillating in irregular waves. Eventually, a clear voice speaks. Target action, return key. Counter action, destroy target. It appears we were being given the choice to return the key or keep it and fight. We chose the latter. We sent in our navy, who made short work of the Guardian drones. Whoever created them made sure that no one could benefit from their remains and the possibility of their defeat. As the last drone was disabled, they all initiated a self-destruct sequence, and what little remains are hardly salvageable. Nevertheless, we are now free to explore the Sussex system and its single planet. The planet that the drones were protecting is tidally locked, one side facing the cold darkness of space, and the other bathed in perpetual light. On the warm, light-filled half of this world, we uncovered the ruins of what may be a Vargosian city. Keides is hopeful to finally find the details of his past and his peoples buried here. It appears that this planet played a vital role in the Vargosian society. Early into the excavations, it's become clear that much of the infrastructure was centered around administrative work. The city's potential served as a hub for communications across a large and wide empire or federation. There is no shortage of spaces for those in leadership to gather, and several public squares of truly massive proportions have already been uncovered. Thanks to the fortunate discovery of an underground vault, Keides has not slept for days. He is convinced that this place holds the key to his existence. Deep within the vault, he discovered row upon row of cryostasis pods. All of them now lie empty. Circuits integrated into the floor lead to a large structure, a throne-like pedestal in the very center of the vault. Against the protests of the science team, Keides made the decision to sit upon the throne. No sooner had he sat down, he lost consciousness. Even as his expression slackened, his body was racked by convulsions. No amount of effort from the science team was able to free him from the throne. Hours passed, and finally, just when it seemed his young body could bear no more, he awoke. It appears he had been experiencing more visions. He describes them for us now. Keides stood within a vast public square, packed inside it with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Faces turned to the sky. They watched as a massive ship descended from the upper atmosphere. At once, a single voice boomed out. "Attend," it said, "for the time of judgment is at hand." Your keys will be taken. Here you shall remain until the end of all things." The cries of his people were deafening in the midst of his vision. He understood that his world had been abandoned. Their masters and overlords, an off-world species of unimaginable power, had found his people lacking. The keys and the stable wormholes they had produced was all that connected his world to the wider galaxy. Cut off from galactic trade, the foundation of his people's prosperity was suddenly and irretrievably lost. As a mercy, his people were given a month to yield all keys and related materials. In truth, it was more of an insult than a mercy. This time was not nearly sufficient for them to save themselves. As an administrative world, the planet did not have the means to sustain its vast population. The best they could hope for was to ration what they had, delaying the time of their starvation. Their off-world masters were well aware of this. In their despair, the planet leaders hatched a plan. Recent forays into advanced medical care, preservation, and genomics had afforded them an unlikely opportunity, and as such, the Vargosian survival plan was set into motion. The pod containing their would-be Scion, Keides, was launched into space, and with it a fragment of the last key, broken into 4 pieces and scattered across the galaxy to avoid detection. Keides was born without parents, the product of genetic engineering. Encoded within his very DNA lay the memories of his people. Upon his maturity, contact with the key would allow him to access these memories in the form of visions. Alongside this plan, the planet's leaders ordered the construction of thousands upon thousands of cryostasis pods and a giant underground space to house them. They hoped that the brightest could sleep, awaiting Keides' return. And so they slept, until the cryostasis machines could no longer support their bodies. Their minds had been reduced to mere data, and they waited for Keides inside the throne. So as not to squander their sacrifice, Keides once more sat upon the throne. This time it proved a shorter and far less dramatic affair. The memories of his people entered him, with the tranquility of a flowing stream. With his ancestors' knowledge and memories in hand, the excavation was shortly concluded. His next course of action is to attempt to process all of the obtained data. Several weeks have passed since Keides took to the machine throne. His shoulders are slumped, his usual vigour diminished. It would seem that recent events have taken their toll. Despite this, he did appear content. "I have my answers," he said. "They may be bittersweet, but I'm glad to know them." We told Keides he has done his ancestors proud, and went on to ask him what he thought we should do with the key. Despite being fully restored and functional, it seems regrettable that its full power had been lost. We are unable to use it without a receiving device. Sadly, although we can create wormholes back to his ancestors' homeworld, we did not possess the means to reconstruct another key at this time. Nevertheless, we hope our physicists continue to gain insights from its study. Regarding Keides, science remains his passion even now. If anything, his ancestors' memories have only whetted his appetite for discovery. The galaxy is full of wonder, and there is a difference between knowing and seeing. In time, he says, I may even see the people of my homeworld restored from the ruin it is today. But for now, what I have learnt is yours. I look forward to applying the lessons of my people. Where do you need me the most? We allowed Keides to return back to science. It was his passion after all, and where we thought he would be most valuable. And thus ends the story of Keides. And finally, we have the Beholder, who is by far the rarest and most elusive paragon in our galaxy. I would imagine that almost none of you listening to this report have encountered this psionic entity, and count yourself lucky if you're one that has. The Beholder can only be found from the spiky readings anomaly, which can only occur on a pre-sapient planet. It is a shroud entity that uses the monolith to reach out as a tool for exploring other planes of existence. It is unique and has two distinct forms. It can act as a spacecraft, in which case it will assume the role of a military commander. Its presence simply removes shields from enemy and allied spacecraft, and its weapons ignore all armor. However, the ship can also land on a planet and assume the role of a governor, becoming the murmuring monolith. It can influence the population living on the planet, slowly turning them into psionic beings. I note, however, it is unable to do this on cybernetic or robotic populations. Dr. Shaw shall detail how we found and contacted the Beholder. During routine scientific operations of Stone Age primitives on Illyria 7, we have identified odd energy fluctuations in the G-band that most definitely should not be there. We pinpointed the source of the energy fluctuations to a monolithic structure in the heart of the primitive territory. The local population have been observed curiously congregating around the structure. If we are to ascertain the purpose of this object, interaction with the planet's inhabitants is inevitable. Science teams were dispatched and have begun investigating the structure on Illyria 7. It appears to be an ancient four-sided pyramid. The scientists report hearing strange whispers in its vicinity, and have aptly named it the Murmuring Monolith. The monolith appears to play an integral part in the rudimentary belief system observed by the planet's primitive species. It is unusual to witness a species at this level of development develop complex spiritual practices when they have yet to begin using proper tools. The Illyrians are territorial and easily provoked, and it appears our arrival has disturbed them. More and more have begun gathering around the monolith. Gaining access to the structure will require force. We've now trained the Illyrians to look upon us as deities. They're now domesticated and rely on us for safety and protection. Our technological prowess is like magic to them, and manipulating their belief system was an easy task. Now that they are properly subjugated, we have full access to the Murmuring Monolith. Study of the monolith is proving time-consuming and less revealing than we anticipated. The structure's secrets elude us. There is an undeniably advanced technology within the pyramid, but the sheer amount of energy being produced is inconsistent with our current understandings of science. Beyond the walls of the monolith, something unusual is going on. A fresh influx of primitives have begun crowding it. In contrast with their initial territorial behaviour, they now seem to be calm and even anticipatory that something is about to happen. As the primitives gathered around the Murmuring Monolith, we observed a phenomenon unlike anything we had previously encountered. A sense of calm washed over the crowd. The creatures were transfixed by an invisible force. Some of our scientists were also caught up in this paranormal event and for a moment lost touch with reality. When they came to, they claimed to have communed directly with the Murmuring Monolith. The scientists were, of course, ordered to debrief and report in full. Their reports regarding the recent communion makes for an interesting read. Supposedly, the ordeal was a liberating and transformative experience. The scientists now refer to the event as the Murmuring, and maintain that the monolith made direct contact with them. In the brief moment of contact, the participants were able to share their innermost thoughts with all involved, and were overcome by a sense of trust and understanding. When the effects faded, the monolith's energy emissions plummeted. Perhaps we could devise a way to re-establish contact with the monolith. Several weeks of intense research has gone by, and we successfully recreated the conditions of the first Murmuring, and initiated a second communication with the monolith. This time, we have been able to sustain the phenomenon, and have established contact with an entity who is using the monolith as a conduit to reach out from another location. The entity has identified itself as the Beholder. It claims to exist within the Shroud, and uses the monolith to reach out from a different plane of existence. It feeds on energy, and has agreed to offer us assistance in exchange for a feast. Clearly, we have no reason to trust this entity, but given that the energy requirements it requests are fairly minor, we suggested to go ahead and feed it the energy it asked for. We fulfilled our end of the bargain with the Beholder, delivering the energy in the amount requested. Upon receipt of the power, the monolith began emitting high-frequency vibrations. It then began shaking, and the ground surrounding it crumbled as the monolith rose, revealing itself to be at least 2 times larger than even our most outlandish estimates. A huge octahedral structure, the monolith was suspended in the air as dirt and dust fell to the ground around it. The inhabitants of the planet screeched in panic as it took to the skies. Climbing high into the atmosphere of Illyria 7, it is now clear that the Murmuring Monolith is a colossal vessel capable of spaceflight. It has currently moved into orbit of the planet. A According to the Beholder, it is indebted to us, and it is capable of two primary functions. It can act as a warship in times of great strife, but its ideal setting is for it to settle on a world of our choosing, where it can assist the world's governors, psionically. The Beholder tells us that should we wish it, over time it will convert the populace of the planet into beings capable of wielding the power of the Shroud. Quite the transformation indeed, and clearly quite a dangerous possibility. Thanks for watching, folks. Have you come across any of these rare paragons? If you've been contacted by the Beholder, please let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more from me, please click the video on screen now.